The Tell America program is a program that we devised with at the Korean War Veterans Association. So we go out to the different schools. It's designed for the legacy of the Korean War. And what we do is we go to different organizations, primarily to schools, secondary schools, junior colleges and universities, to explain what happened during the Korean War. As you know, in the history books, in world history and American history, there's not much mentioned about the Korean War, a paragraph, maybe two at the most. And we've been known as the Forgotten War. And we're informing the people that we talk to, the students, that is not only, is we call it the Forgotten Victory. For what we did in Korea in 1950, 1953, and continue doing in Korea today, we have troops in Korea today, the accomplishments. In 1950, Korea was one of the most impoverished nations in the world. And then today, it is a G20 nation. And this is for what we did in 1950 and 1953 during the war. And this is why we call it the Forgotten Victory. We went to a country we never heard of and fought and helped the people we did not know. And a lot of historians say we lost the war, which we didn't. Our original mission, chartered by the United Nations, and this was a United Nations action, not a United States. There was 20 countries involved in this, all UN countries. And our charter, per se, was to liberate South Korea from the aggression of the North Korean communists. And this is what we did. And if you look at the maps today, you will see that South Korea is a booming economy. When most of us were there, the mode of transportation was ox cart and foot. The middle class, if you want to call them that, had a bicycle. And the super rich had an automobile, and that was it. There was no education. The Korean people have been subject to such tyranny by the Japanese government for all these years that they didn't even have their language. They had to speak Japanese, and now they're speaking their own language of Korean, which is one of the oldest languages in the Asian world. So they went from an impoverished ox cart type nation to one of the leading nations in the world. Like I say, they're in the G20. They're listed as number 11, I believe, in the as most economical countries in the world, and they're number 2 or 3 in Asia of the most profitable countries in the world. So, and you take North Korea, which is nothing. But now we're trying to get this legacy going to spread this word that I just talked about. The Tell America program, in conjunction with the Korean War Veterans Legacy Foundation, who's sponsored by the Korean government and Dr. Jean-Woo Han of Syracuse University, we're getting this spread out. Now, the Korean War Legacy Foundation is a foundation of the 21 nations that fought in Korea. It's their descendants, their grandchildren, great-grandchildren of the veterans that fought in Korea, and we're passing this on through them. The foundation offers the ability for the children, the descendants of these veterans, the ability to meet other descendants from other countries. They are taught interviewing skills so they can go back to their countries and do what I'm doing now, is interviewing the veterans to pass on the legacy through their countries. This year at the foundation meeting in Washington, D.C. in 2014, there was members of 12 of the countries there, and I got to meet them. And I was interviewed by Australians, New Zealanders, and Americans, of course. So this is what we're doing, and this is passed on. This is passed on down through our descendants, through my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, and their children, and on down as long as they live. This will be going on because they're all proud of what we did in Korea, where the average person does not know what happened in Korea. Another thing of the foundation is they sponsor a youth camp, which is 2 weeks in Korea, where the descendant has to pay their airfare, but once they set foot on Korean soil, their money is no good except for souvenirs. It's completely paid for by the Korean government. And it's the same way for the Legacy Foundation when they have the meetings in Washington, D.C. The descendant will pay 50% of their airfare. And once they get into Washington, D.C., their money's no good because it's all paid for, the lodging, the hotel, the trips, and the meals and everything, and the classes are all paid for by the Korean government or by the Legacy Foundation. And this is the only country that's doing this, to preserve the legacy of what was done in Korea 1950, 1953, and presently of the armed forces. So we're tied in, and we're married in, or tied in. We have joined in with the Korean War Veterans Association, has joined with Dr. Han and the Korean War Veterans Legacy to promote this program wholeheartedly throughout all 21 nations that fought in the Korean conflict. Another portion of the legacy, the Korean War Foundation legacy and the Korean War Veterans of America, is we're reaching out to all the schools, primarily social studies, history teachers, to have them come to the convention and add into to modify the history books of the Korean War. And to do this, the teachers that would apply for this it's completely paid for. Their airfare and hotel and classrooms are completely paid for by the Legacy Foundation. And this is to further the education of the students worldwide of what was done during the Korean War. And I think it's a wonderful thing to have this done, is we're promoting history. We offer living history programs where the veterans of the Korean War will come to their classrooms and give a short talk of the Korean War, and they're open to all questions, uncensored. Whatever the students want to ask, the veterans will answer. And bringing the history teachers to Washington, D.C. to the Legacy workshops, this year is the 24th of July through the 27th of July, offers them something they didn't find in all their education experience. And I highly recommend that this be put out to all the schools in all 21 nations. Thank you.